Hello and welcome everybody to World of Warplanes 2.0. I know some of you are probably coming in because, hey, it's a World of Warplanes video on YouTube, and that's fine. Welcome. Good to have you. If you could do me a favor and please leave any comments on what I might have missed, please do that. It'll help greatly. This video is actually aimed at the people who have just figured out that this game exists for one reason or another, and they downloaded it today, and they wanted to find out what they need to know before they get started. So obviously the game has some excellent little videos and some little guidelines and things that you can look through to find out how to do this or that, and those are helpful. But there's some things in the game that us old hands, I guess you could call us, know about the game that maybe you don't. And that's what this video is intended to show you. So first things first, I would like to say welcome. I hope to see you in the skies. If you ever see me around, give me a salute. I'll salute back. Also, I would like to point out that there's some things in the game that are fantastic, but maybe we don't use them as we go further up. For example, flaps. Obviously, none of the starting planes being early 20s, 30s models, sometimes even earlier than the 20s it seems, but they're not. They're actually all somewhat pre-war. These planes don't have flaps. That's just the thing. Flaps didn't come around until later when they were trying to figure out how to make monoplanes develop the same amount of lift for takeoff and landing, yet reduce the drag that they have in flight. What a flap does is it essentially increases the wing area so that the plane can move slower and still produce the same amount of lift. But that wasn't necessary on biplanes. It was necessary once they went to the monoplane, monocoque fuselages that you see later on in the game. This monoplane in particular is an exception to that rule. They just tossed a parasol wing on there. Parasol is what it's called when it's not actually attached to the fuselage. It's attached via stringers and all sorts of other goodies that you got going on there. But, so that aside, that was one of the first things that I do want to point out, is that you want to go in there and click this little gear here, check out the settings, and you can see, you just go through and you can check out all the different stuff on the pages, and ooh, look at the graphics. And I do apologize, by the way. I have a little bit of ADD, so sometimes I see a squirrel and I just can't help but chase it. Anyways, so you go in here and you look at the flight controls. All right. Well, what's this? Q and E are bound to yaw left and yaw right. That's right. So, fun fact about the game. The yaw is not bound by default with the basic controls. I have mine bound as Q and E. I'll explain that a little bit later. That just gives you control over the rudder. For those of you that are unfamiliar with aviation, the rudder is this little piece right here. That's attached to the vertical stabilizer. For more flight controls, let's see, we got the ailerons that are attached to either side of the wing here. You got the elevator that's attached here on the back of the horizontal stabilizer. This is not the bigger horizontal stabilizer, this is just the wing. So there you go. There's the flight control surfaces. Yaw is controlling this surface right here specifically. This is the rudder. Pitch is controlling this surface right here. That'd be the elevator. And roll is controlling this one here. What that means is when you push left or right on yaw, or excuse me, left or right on roll, that is going to make one of these go down and one of these go up, and the airplane will roll left and right along a imaginary line that's straight through the middle of the fuselage this way. Pitch is something that controls the airplane on an imaginary line that goes straight through this way. Imagine it kind of like the wing, but straight through the middle of the fuselage. That's controlled by the elevator right here. Yaw simply makes the airplane do this. Right? It's a left and right around an imaginary line that goes vertically through the fuselage right here. And that is controlled by this. So that is not bound by default. You can set that up as Q and E. It does help out greatly. Moving on though. I have that bound. So let me go back to what I was trying to talk about before I got a little sidetracked there. You go into advanced settings, and you see this button right here, automatic flaps. Extends the flaps automatically. As I said, in the first couple of tiers, you won't really experience that. Once you get later on into the game, planes start having flaps. When you go into a turn and you start turning really hard, the flaps will automatically extend. What this does is it slows the airplane down, which is a negative. But the positive is that it helps you turn a little bit tighter because it's increasing the amount of lift. And a turn is basically the horizontal component of lift in a turn. I could go into more detail about that, but maybe in another video. So anyways, you want to turn the flaps, automatic flaps off, because sometimes you want to turn and you don't really need to turn that tight and you really don't want to bleed off that much speed. So I turn off automatic flaps. Now what happens is, you've turned it off, you don't have anything else that it's bound to. So you go to flight, and for me, I have it bound to my mouse. There's a button on my mouse that I push every time I want my flaps to go down. If you watch my Goblin video that I posted, you'll probably see a couple points in there where it says no flaps. That's because I was instinctively hitting that button that I don't need to hit in planes that do not have flaps. So there's that. You just push this button and the flaps will extend only when you need them. That's probably the biggest tip I can give you starting off, because, hey, carrying energy is super critical to aerial combat maneuvering. So there's that. Alright, now, you can also see that I've got my mouse sensitivity turned up. There's a reason for that. The mouse sensitivity by default, I believe, is 20 or 30%. My controls carried over from my primary account. But mouse sensitivity, you know, you can turn it down if you really want it to be very small. Like, you move your mouse a lot and it doesn't really move the mouse at all on screen, because most people are going to be flying with mouse and keyboard, and that mouse is actually what controls which direction you're going to be going. So if I put my mouse up here, the plane's going to go up and to the right, hopefully. Down here is going to go down to the left. You know, this is going to basically turn me sideways either way, pitch up, pitch down, etc. So I've got my mouse sensitivity turned all the way up, because even though it might kill me a little bit in the dead zone here, in the dead middle when you're trying to aim at a plane, it does allow you to maneuver much faster. I keep my mouse sensitivity at 100%. You can choose to do as you wish. The rest of these settings are kind of however you like them. Now, the advanced settings in general do give you some visual options to look at here. As you can see on the side of the screen there, there's different little indicators that show you your airspeed, your altitude, etc. I've got all these turned on just because I like to know not only what I'm doing at that exact moment, which if you turn this off, you see that bar goes away. Turn this on, it'll show you your altimeter with little hash marks. The reason for that is I like to know when I'm approaching my yellow and red arc, and not just when I'm in my yellow and red arc, which is what you get if you have this off. All that happens is the number color changes. Airspeed indicator, same thing. I like to know when I'm approaching my stall speed, because some planes operate best when you operate them right on the edge of that stall envelope. So I keep that turned on as well. Pitch indicator is also in there too. That one helps me know if I'm pitching my airplane up 10 degrees, down 10 degrees, 5 degrees, etc. Sometimes I like to set an immediate climb, go up to 60%. Sometimes I like to set a reduced climb, I guess you could call it, or a cruise climb, if you will. Set it maybe 5 degrees instead of 60 degrees. So I like having that on there as well. Otherwise, it's just a blank area on your screen. Now, the bank indicator at the bottom you see is that little white bar with the little upside down V inside of it. I leave that on too, just because it helps me orient myself with the horizon. You can leave it on show aircraft bank, but I find that's kind of useless because your airplane is essentially doing the exact same thing as the bank indicator. No real point in having that in, so I leave it on horizon. And then you can turn on some extra features up top. Battle recommendations. I like to know when my airplane's on fire, my pilot's dead, my wings shot off, my tail's out. One of those things along those lines. If you turn that off, you just kind of get the icon. I like to know it. I like to have as much visual representation of what's going on with my plane as possible. Helps me to focus on what I'm doing straight ahead of me. You can also set up these things up top. It just kind of lets you know, here's how many FPS you have, here's how many milliseconds, and packet loss. Sometimes that's important, not necessarily for gaming, but if something's happening, you can look instantly and see, okay, I'm still getting 90 frames per second, but my millisecond ping has gone up to 300. Something might be wrong with my internet connection or the game. I do recommend you send in a support ticket if something like that happens. Hotkey tips, this is just basically if I want this plane to do this, or if I want to see this or that, I push this button. Not necessarily required. None of this stuff is really going to affect your performance in the game, except for maybe the bank indicator as well as these other indicators down here, or perhaps the battle recommendations. I would recommend turning all those on. You can turn them on, turn them off, turn them on Alt. When you push it, when you have it on as on pressing Alt, what that means is that this is going to not be there until you press the Alt key, and then it'll show up. So, or it'll do the opposite technically of what it's doing currently. Those are some things that might help you out going further into the game, further forward. But my brain just kind of went, nope, you're going to do this all in one word, and we're just going to skip right past that. At any rate, moving on. What I was talking about earlier with the yaw left and yaw right keys in there, you can do what's called a rudder turn. which I will demonstrate in a later video. What that is if your plane is turning and you want to maybe pitch down a little bit or pitch up in the turn, you can just use your yaw. You can use your rudder to kind of help you turn through that a little bit faster. It will give you the advantage when you're fighting your own aircraft type, and that's having an advantage is always nice, right? So that's going to do it for this video. I do hope to see you again soon. Let me know in the comments if there's anything in particular you guys would like to see. If you have any questions, please check out the forums. Guys like Mars Revenant and a lot of other old hands are around to help you answer questions. I'm going to be here posting reviews, perhaps some guides and times, and yeah, that's going to do it for me. So as always, my name is Lambo805, and please, if you're ever thinking of taking your own life, take 1 minute, contact somebody, contact anybody. You can spare a minute. I'm getting out of here. Take care.